The Revelation 15 sign. My name is Daniel Vallis and welcome to our channel. Several of our subscribers messaged me and asked me to check out Robert Breaker's latest video, the Revelation 15 sign, what it corresponds to in the sky. And his video is about the great sign that is also mentioned in Revelation chapter 15. And kudos for him for making the video. Very great video. There's a link in the description box where you could watch it too as well. And he just brought up the subject and invited feedback, particularly from those who perhaps study astronomical things more so. And so the purpose of my video today is just to chip in some additional context and thoughts, and we'll look at a few astronomical signs too as well that go with the Revelation 15 sign. In Revelation 15:1 it says, "And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God." And chapter 15 is real short, but verse 1 appears to be a summary of the events that are going to happen in chapter 15. But it is introduced that John, the writer, sees another sign in heaven, another great and marvelous sign. And this is chapter 15, written shortly after chapter 12, the great sign he described there too as well. So these events follow the Revelation 12 event, and you can also tell that these involve the 7 last plagues. But unlike the Revelation 12 sign, this is the only description given about the sign. He just mentions that he saw another sign in heaven, and it's great and marvelous, and it seems to be associated with 7 angels. But that's all the description that he gives, and it is interesting to note that some of the qualifiers from the Revelation 12 sign, such as being clothed with the sun or even the mention of the moon, the other elements mentioned in that aren't mentioned here. So we assume it has none of the same elements as the Revelation 12 sign, which does make it also harder to nail down exactly what he's talking about. But he does see another great sign. The Revelation 12 sign is not the only signal that something is about to happen. Now, Robert Breaker gives a good introduction to the concept that usually Pleiades comes to mind a lot with the association of the 7 angels, or 7 angels in general too as well. The Revelation 15 passage doesn't seem to be definitive to these 7 angels that are often associated with the church. But the Pleiades is a unique collection of stars in Scripture because it is referred to several times in context as representative of angels, and also tied to the church too as well, and it's mentioned multiple times throughout Scripture, and so this is why it's one of the first guesses of what the Revelation 15 sign might be referring to. In Job 9:9, we've talked about this before, talking about God, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades in the chambers of the south. And it's also interesting just to note the context, talking about God there, how he commands the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. We've been seeing that theme lately too as well. But emphasis here, even in Job, the earliest book of the Bible, drawing attention. He was bringing Job's attention to Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades here, and the chambers of the south. So very long history of being known in the Bible, and God drawing attention to Pleiades, the 7 stars there. Amos 5:8, "Seek him that maketh the 7 stars, and Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night, that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. The Lord is his name." Notice that he's saying, seek him that maketh the 7 stars in Orion. These are associated with God. When we see Orion, when we see Pleiades, is to look at their creator, to see their creator. A lot of attention is being drawn to the chambers of the south, and particularly these 7 stars and constellations. And as we'll see soon, Orion is very useful in identifying where the 7 stars are as well. So it's interesting how they bring attention to both. And in Revelation, right at the beginning, attention is drawn to the 7 stars. When John meets with Christ, down in verse 20 of chapter 1, the mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. And so throughout the Bible, there is association of the 7 stars, and particularly in Revelation, which the Revelation 12 sign is recorded in and the Revelation 15 sign is recorded in, it should catch our attention that the book starts out with Christ introducing John to the concept of 7 angels and 7 stars. So we have to keep that in mind, that perhaps it may be referenced later on. Now with the Revelation chapter 15 sign, there are about 3 different possibilities that it could be referring to. Some people have proposed the northern star Polaris. Others have proposed another constellation near Pleiades. But Pleiades by far is mentioned in Scripture multiple times, being brought attention to it. And it should catch our attention that Revelation starts out with bringing attention to the 7 stars. And John would have immediately identified that with a picture of Pleiades. And throughout history also, Pleiades has been associated with a picture of the church. And so this is our first and best option when we look at chapter 15. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. So while it does not give us a lot of details, we assume that the context, and it does tell us events to help nail down a context, but we also assume that parts of this are recognizable. And if you go out and look in the chambers of the south, I went out last night and looked at Pleiades, but here's a shot in stellarium just for orientation. And over here is Pleiades, and you can see it with your naked eye, but you do need a clear sky to see it, because it can be dim and faint sometimes and slightly blurry. But one easy way to find Pleiades is to look for Orion, and if you can find Orion's belt, that will generally point you along that line toward Pleiades. And particularly if you could find Sirius and follow that line, that creates a pointer line toward Pleiades, and that will give you a good idea. If you have questions, if you are seeing it or where you should start looking, look for Orion's belt and Sirius, and that'll kind of draw a line to where Pleiades normally is. It's in Taurus and the bull, and there's the eye of the bull, the bullseye. And I went out last night and took a picture of it, and this is with my average camera, nothing special, but I had to zoom all the way out to be able to get this. This whole scene takes up a big portion in the sky. So Orion is very easy to spot normally in clear skies, and even with a slight haze, it's easy to see Orion. And so then if you can find Sirius, which is very bright, so it's easy to see, just follow that line along, and that'll point you toward Pleiades. And this picture closely approximates what you can see with just your normal eyes, even without a camera or binoculars. I had to brighten this up just a little bit so you could see it on the screen, but you can generally tell where Pleiades is, and that it's about what it would look like to the naked eye. Not quite that big though, but you'll be able to tell there's a cluster of stars over there. And those who have really, really good eyesight can normally count the major ones. But again, it's in Taurus, and there's the bull's eye, and that's part of the bull. Now when I zoomed in with my camera, which again is not anything special, this gives you a better idea of the grouping of stars known as Pleiades. And you can see a little bit of wispy dust there. There is a nebula there. If you have a telescope, you can see it a lot better, a lot of that finer detail. So again, try going out looking toward the chambers of the south. Identify Orion, the belt of Orion, and Sirius, and that will point you right toward Pleiades. Now, since this is a sign in the future, let's try to examine the context of these events described in Revelation, and that will give us an idea of when we should look for a sign. Whenever we don't know details of a particular event, particularly described in Revelation or whatnot, we should always look at the context and also understand that Revelation is written from the understanding you have read previous books and what Christ previously said. So whenever we reach an area we don't know, let's always back up and study what we do know. What did Christ say before? And that will give us a better idea of how to narrow down our options. So when we look at a timeline for the years ahead and where we are right now, we are in February of 2017. We know the Revelation 12 sign is in September on the 23rd. Very unique celestial date marker. You really can't see it, but that is happening later on this year in just a few months. And we've looked at what Christ said about this sign before, and that gives us a context of events as well and a sequence to keep in mind. He said there were going to be tribulation events, and the sun was going to be darkened, and the moon will not give her light. stars will fall from heaven, powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. So again, looking at the context of what Christ already said helps us understand what we're looking at when we see later events described in Revelation. Look at what he told us before. It hasn't changed. And so we know there's going to be tribulation events that will happen, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And so we already know there is that sequence. And then he says, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. That's tied directly to the end of what he said before. So there's going to be tribulation events, and then a sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And then there will be other events that lead the tribes of the earth to mourn. There is going to be a time gap there. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And chapter even tells us there's going to be 1,260 days in Revelation 12 between that celestial date marker and when he arrives. The sign of the Son of Man is telling the world that the Son of Man is returning again soon. He came once, yes, but he's coming again. He's making a second coming. Prepare ye the way. This is a warning signal to the world. He is coming again. And so we know from the context of that the bowls of wrath described in the Revelation 15 sign are going to follow after the Revelation 12 sign, obviously. And typically they're grouped as a subset of the seventh seal. And since we understand that the 6 seals, just by context of Revelation, happen before the Revelation 12 sign, it appears that the other events and the final events come afterwards. Particularly, we know the bowls of wrath come after that. The time of wrath is after that sign, after that celestial date marker. And John says, and I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous. 7 angels having these 7 last plagues, which are the 7 vials, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. So now that we know the timing and the context of when it appears and what has happened before that, understanding what comes before this helps understand what is going to be seen in heaven during this time. So again, this helps narrow down our options when we understand the context that Christ already gave. Now presently, the sign is unknown. We can't identify it because he doesn't give details like he did for the Revelation 12 sign. And he actually leaves out some of those elements, particularly the sun and moon. So it is a lot more vague. And that's why we say it's presently unknown. But the first assumption, just because Revelation introduces Pleiades to as well, is it's assuming that it probably is dealing with the 7 stars, the Pleiades. And that's just a educated guess, but it is presently unknown. But let's look at some context. Now many of you will remember the Star of Bethlehem Echo reminder that happened back in 2015 on June 30th. The same night as that was going on was also what I nicknamed as the American Blood Moon. It wasn't a true blood moon, but it was due to all the smoke from Canadian and Alaskan wildfires that turned the Midwest moon orange. There's a lot of smoke coming down from those regions toward the Midwest, and so a lot of people noticed that the moon was very orange on that night, and even the sun was somewhat dimmed by all the smoke that was up in the upper atmosphere at the time. And this was all due to a lot of smoke that was coming down, and this was just from one particular group of wildfires coming down, smoke from that. Christ told the disciples that the sun will be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and then shall the sign of the Son of Man appear. So, some significant events are going to happen that are going to throw up a lot of smoke and a lot of dust, and those are the first 6 seals. World War III, basically, and all the events there described with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's going to be some significant changing of the visibility in the heavens. And so we have to keep this in mind when understanding celestial signs that are going to be coming after this point, and the events that lead up even to the Revelation 12 sign. The visibility in the heavens is going to be significantly changed. In Revelation, he talks more on what he told his disciples earlier. The angel opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. That's going to throw up a lot of dust. And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Okay, this is just the sixth seal, and this event, from the context Christ told his disciples, will happen before the Revelation 12 sign, before the sign of the Son of Man appears. And so we got to keep in mind, there's a great earthquake. Earthquakes do trigger volcanoes. Imagine a great earthquake that affects the whole earth. It mentions every mountain and island are moved out of places. Imagine how many volcanoes are going to be popping off just from this earthquake. A lot. And then you have all the fires that are started when earthquakes happen. There's going to be a lot of smoke thrown up. Not counting World War III and cities burning and all that stuff too. And it's going to significantly dim the sun. The sun's going to become black as sackcloth of hair. Now, sackcloth is cloth that sacks are made out of. Very cheap material. In the ancient world there, it was generally some type of cheap wool or goat's hair, as this example from the British Museum. So it's not a jet black, but it's more like a charcoal or very dirty brown. Again, it all depends on exactly what animal you take it from, but there's generally a dark charcoal or a dark brown. Almost black, but not jet black. So it's going to become black as sackcloth of hair. It's going to be very significantly dimmed. But it appears you'll still be able to identify where it's at. But the moon's going to become as blood. It's going to be a deep red. And as we mentioned before, these events, these effects on the world are going to last for months and over a year. When you read historical accounts about Mount Krakatoa and even recent ones with Mount St. Helens, the events that throw up a lot of dust and volcanic ash into the air, those effects linger for a long time. So the world is going to recognize the fulfillment of these passages by seeing the moon as blood for months and months and months. And Revelation 8:12 mentions, and the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. The day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Now this is the fourth trumpet mentioned in Revelation chapter 8. So there's going to be some significant dimming of the sun and moon before the Revelation 15 event, even before the Revelation 12 event. So when we look back at our timeline of events, we have to keep this in mind. There's going to be some significant dimming of the sun and the moon and all the stars too as well. It's going to be very hard to see the stars. Even ones that are already needing a clear night to see now, it's pretty much going to be impossible to see them then. If the smoke and dust is dimming the sun and moon by a third, then it's going to be close to impossible to see a lot of these stars. So we have to consider that with the Revelation 15 sign of it might be visible to those down on earth. Remember, John is recording this from his perspective when he was up in heaven in the spirit. So he's really effectively looking downward when he sees the Revelation 12 sign and this other sign. So from the earth perspective, from down on the surface, you might not be able to see those signs, even though from a heavenly perspective, they might be able to see those events transpiring. Which means that it might be another celestial date marker, just like the Revelation 12 sign. Even without all the smoke and dust, you're not going to be able to see the Revelation 12 sign. You'll know what's going on. And that's really all it is. It's a celestial date marker recorded in Scripture, so we can know the day and hours that that sign happens at. So it appears that with the context of events that are going on, and the ambiguity of not describing it, it might be another celestial date marker, and it even could just be an event that happens at that time, such as a comet or something that will only happen then, and they'll know it when they see it type of thing. We don't know. But with what we have seen so far with the context, and knowing a time frame to expect the sign to be in, let's go to Stellarium and let's just preview the events that are going to happen in the heavens, primarily along the ecliptic, the chambers of the south, between now and the beginning of 2021. Let's just look at it and see what's going on. And let's pay attention to what's going on in Pleiades, because that's our first option, that's our first guess. But we'll take a wide picture so we can view the whole ecliptic area. Now up here is Pleiades. Again, you could see Sirius and then Orion and that draws a line pretty much toward that area, helps you identify it. And notice that Jupiter is in Virgo at the moment. It's going to be traveling real slow as we go through the days ahead. But let's start the animation and just see what happens in the Pleiades area. We'll take several snapshots as we go along. Now, even though this is not after the Revelation 12 sign, just want to show you how close these events happen. Mars and the planets that travel along the ecliptic come very close to Pleiades. And so we're going to be looking at some of the events, but as we're going to see in the days ahead, there's not many things that happen near Pleiades. So again, this is on April 21st, 2017. May 20th, 2017, again, coming up very soon, the sun will be passing by that area. But this is not unique, but we'll take note of it. It's not unique because it's going to happen every single year. That doesn't make this a unique sign. But since the sun will still be somewhat visible during that time, this is a visible entity in the heavens that can be seen, so we're at least going to consider and see, are other events happening with the sun near that area. And then here is the September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign. And that's something to consider too as well. The sign, particularly here, is a sequence of events. It takes up a good portion of the ecliptic too as well. So that's something we can consider. But you can see the arrangement of where everything is there. (2019). Quite a big jump of events though. On March 31st, Mars will be back at Pleiades. So it's not going to be near there since 2017. Not much going on near Pleiades, we're going to see. May 21st, 2019. This is interesting because the Sun is at Pleiades at the same time as Mercury. Mercury has long been associated with the messenger. And angels are often associated with messengers and called the messengers of God too. So, very interesting that this idea of messengers and drawing attention to Pleiades at the same time, which is often associated with angels, just to catch our attention that this is one of the more significant things that raises some eyebrows. (2020), April 3rd. This is very interesting because Venus will be practically driving right through Pleiades, right through the bottom portion of it, essentially going right over Pleiades. So, calling attention to it and pointing straight to it, the planets have a little variation as they move along the ecliptic, and here Venus rides high enough where it passes over the lower portion of Pleiades. So again, this raises eyebrows, but it's hard to state anything definitive beyond that. May 22nd, 2020, the Sun is going to be near Pleiades again, and this is unique though because the Moon is also going to be in the same area, and it's also going to be pretty much a new moon, which means it's going to be completely unseeable, but it's just interesting to note that they're both there at the same time. Then March 4th, 2021, Mars is again at Pleiades. And again, all these signs are visible to the naked eye on regular conditions, though. You can normally spot Mars, no problem. If you know where to look, in Pleiades you can usually single out. And maybe by the end of the tribulation, some of that major dust might have settled out, but there is another global earthquake toward the end too as well. So it's really hard to state, but it appears the visibility is not going to be great at all during most of the tribulation. So again, returning to the timeline, the sun events, again, happen every single year, so they're not abnormal, but in 2019, Mercury is going to be there at the same time as the sun, so that's interesting, possible messenger illusion. And then when we look at just the planetary events, not much at all happens at Pleiades. Mars visits 3 times between now and the end of the tribulation, but it has caught our attention that it's landing almost to the day, pretty much 2 days before the king is expected to return. Could be allusions to Armageddon, but again, that's kind of a small time frame there. Hard to say. Venus at Pleiades would be the only other thing that would catch our attention at Pleiades from now for the next 3.5 years. So again, we don't have an idea of what the sign is, and maybe they'll recognize it when they see it. And the events are going to be so outside of the context that we're used to that it is hard to kind of guess what is going to be seen, but it is assumed that they will know it when they see it. But even though there are things we don't know, when we do look at it in context of what we do know, that helps us understand a better idea of the timing and what's going to be going on around there. And so that does help narrow things down and give us an idea of when it doesn't go to as well. You know, we're not looking 7 years beyond the Revelation 12 sign. We're just looking after the Revelation 12 sign for just 1,260 days, because that's the time frame. Because we know what Christ said, that the first 6 seals are going to happen before that. So knowing what Christ said and reading and understanding that comes before the book of Revelation helps us narrow down the options. If you haven't yet, I highly suggest you download our booklet, The Revelation Chapter 12 Sign, The Promise of the Lord's Soon Return. It's a sign to the world to prepare ye the way. He is coming again. We have a frequently asked questions section in there about how it's not relating to the rapture. We have other things that point out and make it clear it's not referring to the rapture. It's referring to the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, that he is returning again. And we have an overview of the first 6 seals that are going to be happening like he said, and then the sign will appear. And we have a sequence of events summarized there too as well. And the disciples fully understood this sign he was talking about, and they asked him, what's going to be the sign of thy coming? Just like any sign along the highway, it's telling you what's coming up. Not at that spot, but what's coming up. And Jesus told them, the sign of the Son of Man. That's going to be the sign of my coming, to rule as king. And so they already knew what that sign was, and John took that understanding with them to the book of Revelation as well. It's a message to the world to prepare ye the way. Just like John the Baptist told the world to prepare the way 3.5 years before Christ rode into Jerusalem, the world is given another sign to prepare ye the way 3.5 years before the King returns a second time. The Revelation chapter 12 sign, you can find a link in the description box. And again, check out Robert Breaker's video, and we always keep in context and in mind what has Christ told us, and that gives us an understanding as we read the book of Revelation. There is a lot we don't know, but when we look at what we do know and what Christ clarifies for us, that does give us an understanding of where we are right now. We are looking up now while the signs can be seen. We can look up. We are told to lift up our heads now because we can see things in the heavens telling us to look up right now. We've been on the wise men's journey. We've seen celestial signs that they saw too as well. And likewise, we see celestial signs and we rejoice with exceeding great joy when we realize that we're seeing the exact same signs that signaled the King came the first time. We know he's coming before the Revelation 12 sign. And he told us, when you see these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. We see so many signs telling us that we should be looking up with expectation that our Redeemer is drawing nigh. So we will rise up like the wise men, and we will go forward with what we do know, going out to meet the King. and serving Him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.